Welcome everyone for today's episode with Marteka. Marteka, I actually met on a business conference. I went to California Reading and I met this amazing woman with full of energy. She's so focused in what she's doing. She's so purposeful in what she's doing, and she has a huge passion of helping others within mental health. So welcome today, Marteka. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I'm just so excited to share my story, and it's amazing how we met, how, God brought us together. And so it's no coincidence that I am here today, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity.
So just tell, for those that don't know you, how did you get to know God and Jesus?
And so I grew up, I'm from a Caribbean background, and it's quite normal, like culturally, to go to church. So as a child, I was sent to Sunday school, and I probably went till I was around 7. And then I kind of, like, God wasn't really like the center of our house. God was always something that you prayed if you needed something, or you wanted something from God, or a crisis was happening, like anyone.
Yeah.
Most people, when everything's going wrong and there's nowhere to go, it's like, oh God, please help. And I think it's like a human instinct, right? We just know that there's someone, you want something bigger than you to come and save the day. And so I pretty much had that kind of relationship with God until I was about 17. And I met this really amazing woman who was a friend, who was the mum of my friends. And she, I just found that there was just something about her that was sticky. And, she never talked to me about the Bible or Jesus or anything like that. I just liked spending time. I just really liked going to that house. I didn't know why. But I just felt really kind of like it was almost magnetic. I felt really attracted to being there. And there was something very peaceful about her. She was very joyful. And I kind of, she never, ever spoke to me about God and church and none of that. And then one day I asked her, like, why are you so peaceful? Like, why do you have so much joy all the time? Like, what is it? What do you do? Like, I want some of that. And that's when she said to me, I go to church. And I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, you should come one day. And I thought, yeah, well, if it makes you like this, then that's my life. I was quite troubled. I suffered a lot with anxiety. I was quite depressed. I was having very sort of traumatic relationships with guys, and just in a really difficult place. And that sense of peace that I felt in her home and with her was something I really desired and was missing in my life.
Yeah.
And so I went to this church with her one day, and church to me was this kind of really boring place. We've got a program in the UK called Songs of Worship, Praise, or I can't remember the name of it. It's a worship program, but it's very kind of Church of England, it's very formal, quite boring. And my experience of church and going to school, and going to sort of a Church of England school, was this kind of very formal, rigid way of knowing God, like this kind of rules and boundaries. And I went to this very kind of black, charismatic church. Everyone was jumping around, singing, and it was so joyful. And I was just like, is this really church? I've never experienced this in my life. And so I kind of got a different perspective of God and of church, and there was something about that peace that I wanted. And there was kind of an altar call at the end, and the pastor, the minister said, you know, if you want to receive Jesus into your life, come to the front of the church. And I did, not quite knowing what that involved. I went to the front and I was like, yeah, I want a bit of that. And I remember saying a prayer with him, you know, to sort of ask God to, you know, forgive me for my sins, and just to open my heart to him and to let Jesus in. And from that day, I mean, kind of on a practical level, my life didn't really change much. It took a long time to kind of work through a lot of my issues, but the peace and joy that I felt in my heart that day, I will never forget it. And, you know, it was so overwhelming that I kind of went away and told all my friends and family of this experience. And even my friends were like, wow, I want some of that. And, you know, we've been, you know, going out every weekend, drinking, you know, experimenting with drugs, doing all the silly things that you do when you're a teenager. And then all of a sudden, all my friends were interested in church and going to church. And it was like, they were just as like filled with joy as I was, and couldn't believe it. So I had this real kind of encounter with God that you can't really read about in the Bible. It's a personal relationship and experience. And
Wow.
you know, as I've kind of got older and learned more about the Bible and read more and spent more time with God, I realized that actually, you know, that the rules and the boundaries that are in the Bible are there for our benefit, but actually it's about personal relationship, and it's about, you know, spending time in his presence and receiving that peace and that joy. And, you know, we can't earn that. It's just given to us freely. And that's what's so moving and beautiful about knowing God.
Yeah. That's so good. I get so touched to hear it. I love to hear other people's just encounter with Jesus. It's just, I love it. So, and then
don't get me wrong, people were also very like skeptical and critical how I could, you know, turn from this kind of one day I'm like this and the next day I'm like this. And, you know, there's always the naysayers, if you like, which is fine. But I genuinely had this experience, and it's an experience that I can't deny or forget.
I love that. I love that. And then you went into, so let me ask you this. Which mountain do you feel called to?
So I believe I'm called to the mountain of business. I mean, I always had, from sort of a very young age, I remember being sort of 7 years old, and I would go with the neighbour, you know, with a bucket and a sponge and wash people's cars, you know, for money. When I was sort of 16, I had a market stall in Hackney Wick, and we used to sell mobile phone accessories. I always had some kind of side hustle. Like I used to be a massage therapist, so I'd work full time, and then I worked in a gym running my own business doing massage. Then I had I started doing therapy and one-to-one, as well as work, you know, having a full-time job. So I always had like a side hustle, and I always interested in, you know, not just being dependent on my salary. I'd kind of grown up in a home where, you know, my mum had always been very financially independent. And, you know, even though my mum and dad, you know, are married, they still are, and they lived in the same household. My mum always brought us up. I've got 2 other sisters. So, you know, as females, she was always very much like, you know, don't just get married and rely on a man, like have your money, make sure you know, you're self-sufficient and you can support yourself. And, you know, in some ways that's like, you know, I think I'm probably a bit too independent, living in that kind of environment with 3 girls. But actually in other ways it made me I'm a real kind of go-getter and a self-starter. And even when I worked for, probably employed for like 15 years, and I never felt like entirely happy kind of having to do what my boss told me to do. and having to, fit into kind of the company rules and ways of doing things. Also, as a Black woman, I always felt like I stood out and I was different, and I could see ways to improve things, and I could see different ways to do stuff. And obviously, when you work in a corporation, in an organization, you need to, kind of stick to the aims and objectives of the organization. And I remember always wanting to change stuff, being frustrated that I couldn't. So, having a side hustle for me alongside work kind of gave me that outlet. But I never quite planned to go into business the way I am now. Like, I've been in my business for nearly 4 years. And there's been some peaks and troughs in that, it's not all been smooth sailing, but I've actually learned so much about myself, and I'm so much more confident in kind of, who I am, what God's called me to be, and the legacy that I'm supposed to lead for other people.
Yeah, that's good. So, and before we go into that, I want to ask you just, so I told you guys in the beginning, she's working within the mental health space. But why did you choose that subject? How did you figure that out, that this is what I want to do? Because there are a lot of people are like, I don't know what to do. I have so many different interests. So how did you come to that conclusion that this is where you want to work? This is where I feel my purpose is, and this is where I feel my legacy is?
So, I mean, I think that it's interesting with purpose, isn't it? Because I think that our purpose is always connected to the things that we love to do. And if anyone ever asks me about purpose and how do I find my purpose, I always say, well, what would you do for hours that you wouldn't, even if you weren't getting paid, you'd still love doing it? And I always love people. I always love connecting with people, talking to people, being with people. Like, if you read my school reports when I was like 7 years old, they were like, Marteka's really intelligent, but she's a bit of a chatterbox. And it had all of this stuff all over it. So the markings were there from, sort of infant school, primary school. And so I remember when I left school, my parents, kind of like most Caribbean families, wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or, some kind of academic job. And I hated academia. I found the rigidness of education, like, it just didn't suit my personality. And I was just like, no, I'd rather go to work. I don't want to do any more study. And I did. And I went out and got a full-time job, and I was working in the financial sector, in banking, and I had a really good salary, but I was just not fulfilled. And I remember sort of my early 20s thinking, I need to do something that I'm going to enjoy for the next 20 years at least. And so I retrained as a therapist, doing CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. And I remember being probably the youngest person on the course. And I remember thinking, and everyone was sort of, I was like 20, 21, and everyone was in their like 50s. It was kind of like a retirement job that they were going to go into part-time. And I was just like, I don't think anybody's going to take me seriously as a counsellor. They're going to think I don't have life experience. And so I was like, okay, I'll do the course and let's see what comes out of it. And then from there, I went into working in rehabilitation with drug and alcohol, people that had drug and alcohol issues. And I just really enjoyed like listening to their stories, learning about their lives. And, we really, I think it's an area that's really stigmatized. And obviously coming from, a Black Caribbean family, I understood being the underdog and how people judged you and made assumptions about you. And so I could really connect to, some of their stories and some of the things that happened. And then it just went on from there. I went from kind of working in a rehab to doing drug and alcohol treatment in prison, and then into a managerial role, and I got sort of quite high up in senior management in the healthcare sector, and sort of 10 years in, and I thought I actually don't have any like proper qualifications. I should do something in this. And at the time, I also fancied a change in my career. I'd gone, you know, when you've done sort of caring roles for years and years and years, you get a little bit burnt out, a little bit tired. And so I took a break, and I started working part-time, and then I studied psychotherapy part-time. And I think that's really where my career took off. You know, when I started my master's, and it was a long slog. Like, a lot of personal difficulty happened, you know, in that I had an ectopic pregnancy, and my marriage fell apart, and I really, you know, had a lot of kind of personal adversity and pain to kind of walk through. And at the time, I remember feeling really broken and quite fragmented. Like, I felt like someone had taken a baseball bat and sort of smashed my life into tiny little pieces, and it's like I had to glue it all back together again. And I remember thinking, God, like, where are you in all of this? Like, you know, why are you allowing this to happen to me? I'm supposed to be your child. Like, it's not supposed to be like this. And I remember God kind of, I remember like God saying that, you know, I am with you, I am here, I am holding your hand. And I you know, as much as there was a lot of turmoil in that period of my life, there was also a lot of like deep learning. And I would say this one thing, that, you know, when you go through adversity, when you go through difficulties, it's really easy to kind of, you know, be the poor me and why me type, you know, thinking. And actually, there's so much opportunity in it. I can't tell you the amount of women that I've worked with, you know, in my professional career, but also in my personal life, that I've been able to walk through this exact situation, you know, with them, because I've been there, and I know what it feels like. And I'm not saying you necessarily need that, but I think it's given me a deeper level of compassion and empathy that I perhaps wouldn't have if I hadn't have walked in those shoes. And so, you know, sometimes I think that, you know, God gives us, or we're allowed to have these challenges for a greater purpose. And I think that for me, I didn't really kind of equate mental health to business until I started Benevolent Health. And originally we started as a consultancy, because I'd worked in the healthcare sector for, you know, a good 15 years. I knew the system really well. I'd kind of, you know, worked across all the different parts, and I had a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge. And I started working for a consultancy here in the UK, doing service redesign and helping hospitals to transform the way they delivered care to help more people. And that's when I realized actually that I wanted to work for myself, and working for myself would give me a lot more independence. And so I started Benevolent Health with the idea of wanting to reach more people, wanting to make mental health more accessible. And it's really interesting, because in my job, I very rarely talk about Jesus, and I very rarely talk about my faith, because, you know, I'm working with vulnerable people, and that's not my role or my place, if you like. However, it's back where I started. The things that attracted me to, you know, when I first met Jesus and I became a Christian, it wasn't that, you know, my friend's mum had talked to me about God, had talked to me about Jesus. It was how she showed up. It was her peace, her presence. And I think that's what I bring to the marketplace, is a presence that, you know, changes the atmosphere in a room, like that brings joy, that is peaceful, that's able to contain a lot of difficult emotions or challenges, and think about it, and help people work through it. And, you know, that's a unique skill that God has given to me. And, you know, we've grown as a business, particularly in the pandemic, because people are really struggling with mental health. Organizations are really struggling to manage their workforce, to support leaders, to develop the capacity to work with that. And this is really what I love. It really is my passion. So I feel like God's given me a passion that I can go and use in the marketplace, but I also think I bring a calmness, a peace, a joy to the marketplace that is him, even if I'm not, you know, giving people scriptures and inviting them to church, because I don't think that's, you know, necessarily always the right thing or the way to evangelize. I think sometimes being who you are and sharing love, or, you know, helping the community, doing the practicalities of Christianity, is sometimes what's needed. So I think I'm a covert evangelist, actually.
That's really good. I love how you share, you know, your journey, how you come to start your company and your passion for it, but also how you just like, because I mean, people notice change if you carry the presence of God, and how you bring that in, and through relationship. Like that's the first thing God did too with us. Like it's a relationship first. So I love that. So I want to ask you a little bit just about mental health, because you mentioned that, you know, this year we are, you know, now recording in the beginning of 2021, and we had a year of pandemic. And in some, especially I think in Christian settings, we kind of don't talk about mental health. Or it's like, yeah, we'll pray it away, but it's not that easy. So how do you like start to talk to people about mental health, and especially within church?
I mean, I think mental health needs to be part of our everyday conversations, and I don't think it's any different in the church. I think some significant things happened last year, or probably the back of 2019, where, you know, some prolific leaders committed suicide, and mental health was talked about a lot more in the church. I think from a leadership perspective, most pastors will probably say 80% of their work is, you know, mental health and supporting people in the community, you know, with various issues. And I think to some extent that's the role of the church, to pastor people. But I think, you know, if you look at the history, certainly in the UK anyway, it's been seen as, you know, it's a demonic possession. And, you know, I think there is a spiritual element to mental health. There's a spiritual element to everything, if, you know, we believe that we're spirit first. And I know that won't sit well with some people, but that's my belief, that it starts in the spirit first. But actually a large part of it is mindset, and, you know, our experiences and our soul. And if our souls have been hurt and we don't have the right mindset, it's very difficult to recover. And I'm not talking about, you know, serious mental illness like schizophrenia or you know, bipolar disorder or something like that, because that's you know, an illness that needs you know, proper medical intervention. It needs you know, psychiatry. It needs you know, real kind of structured support. I'm talking about, you know, the everyday kind of stress, anxiety, depression, the things that impact all of us. And I think that if we start to think about the things that we think about every day and renewing our minds, I mean, you know, the Bible speaks about this a lot, doesn't it? Renewing our minds and what we fill our minds with and what we allow into our minds. But also, you know, if we've had traumatic stuff happen to us in our lifetime, if, you know, you've been in an abusive relationship for 20 years, or you've lost a baby, or you've, you know, been through a divorce, or your child died, or, you know, something awful's happened to you, a bereavement, obviously you're going to feel sad. Like, you know, we're designed that way to, and it's, I feel sometimes like the church can be like, you know, don't focus on that stuff. It's like, you know, God's here and Jesus has fixed it all. And that's true, and that's great, and we should look to the hope of Christ. But that doesn't mean that we don't have pain and that we don't suffer and that we don't need to go through a healing process. So I think that's it, in the church there can be sometimes a lack of awareness of kind of, you know, where people are in their journey, in terms of, you know, working through their grief or loss or pain, or, you know, whatever their difficulties or trauma has been. And it can't just be kind of magic wanded away with Jesus, as much as, you know, I would love that to be the reality. And, you know, it takes us time to change our mindset. We have to take action. We have to do things differently. And that means that, you know, you might need to go and see a therapist or get a coach, or, you know, get some external help to do things differently. And because that's the key thing, isn't it? It's taking action and moving forward in the direction that you want to go in, and not staying in the same place. Because there's thousands of people that go to church that are Christians and that, you know, would say that they're believers in Jesus Christ, that have been repeating the same problems for years and years and years and years, and you know, haven't sort of addressed those issues, because of this sort of magic wand thinking. But yeah, absolutely, we all have to take action if we want something to change.
Yeah. So how you say take action, but how do you like specific help people to just improve their health?
So I think the first thing is about awareness, and I spend a lot of time. We've got a podcast called Better Mental Health, where we talk to different people from all different walks of life. Like this month, we've been talking about addiction, we've been talking about infertility, menopause, all of these things that happen in our lives as natural parts of our lives, and thinking about how they impact our mental health and our well-being. And so I think there's a real opportunity to have more everyday conversations around these topics that impact us through our life cycle. So the first thing's about gaining an awareness, and then once we've got an awareness about something, that's when we can decide if we want to take action or not. And I think sometimes our defenses, or the things that stop us moving forward, are there for a reason. It might be that those things keep us safe, or you know, that we're comfortable in that situation, and we might not want to change it, and that's okay. And if it is uncomfortable, or you recognize that these things are holding you back from, you know, going to the places that you want to go to, then actually you need to start to work on them. And that, I think that looks different for different people. And you know, not everybody's going to go to see a therapist, not everybody's going to have a coach or a mentor. Some people might read self-help books, some people might go and speak to their pastor, some people go off and do yoga and meditation, you know, whatever you know, you relate to or connect to, that helps you to, you know, to move forward, to shift your mindset. I always encourage people to try different things and find stuff that works for them. But I always try to get them to think about, well, what's the end goal, and where is it that you want to be? Because if we don't have purpose, if we don't have direction, then I think it's really difficult to, you know, when you're wading through mud or wading through difficult things in your life, it's very difficult to kind of understand that you've reached that point, or you've got to that thing, if you don't know where it is that you're going to. So I always firstly try to raise awareness, and then secondly try to get people to focus on an outcome, a goal, a place that they want to be.
That's really good. So today we are in 2021, and social media is very kind of like a very strong part of the lifestyle of the younger generation. So how do you think that is impacting our mental health?
Listen, I use social media so much in the work that I do, and I find it incredibly helpful to get my message out there. And I feel that, as a company, we use social media for good to challenge, stigma, to challenge the way people think about certain topics, to educate, and to bring positivity and light into people's lives, and show them that they're not the only one, that there are other people out there that have the exact same issues and look like them. However, I do think there's a real challenge not to. So one of the things that I've been challenged by, particularly in pandemic times, is all of the fear and all of the negative news that is sort of pumped out daily, and you sort of pick up your phone and you can get really sucked into reading about all of these different things for hours and hours, which can really change the state of your being and your well-being and how you feel. And the other thing, and I'm guilty of this, and I think we all are, is comparison. We look down posts and think, oh, I'm not there yet, I'm not good enough, or I haven't done this. And we start to compare our lives to other people. We're actually, if we believe we're created for purpose, then, our purpose, our mission is unique, that, no two people are the same. We've all got different purposes. Even if you work in a team with people, you'll have different skills that complement or rub up against each other. If you're in a relationship, a marriage relationship, you both got different strengths, right? And you have to work through your challenges, and so there's always some challenge along with this. But I think comparison really robs us, and I think that's one of the consequences I see of social media on mental health, particularly, for example, with young females, that feel that they have to look a certain way, or the narrative around men and what men should be, and this whole conversation around toxic masculinity, around gender identity. All of these things start to be compared, and we start to feel like we need to be more like someone else because they're seen as successful, or they're seen as having a good life. Or actually, we know that the thing that we present on social media is always our best foot forward. It's even today, to do this interview, I was like, oh, let me go and put on my lipstick. You want to make a good impression. So I think sometimes the reality is, and I mean, if you look at all the filters that are on Instagram, that are on Snapchat, that are on all of these TikTok, on all of these sites, like, we always don't want to show ourselves in the light that we really are in, and so I think we have to bear that in mind when making comparisons, that actually this is social media life. It might not be that person's real reality.
Yeah, that's so good. So my last question to you is to give a shout out to the younger generation about their purpose, about their mountain, and also what are you want to encourage them for, from now and the next 10 coming years.
So I guess if I was speaking to the younger me, and the younger people listening to this podcast, I would say, think about legacy. Like, what do you want to be remembered for, and what is it that you want to be doing in 10 years time? Because it's the little things that we do now that sets us up for our 10 years time. This idea of kind of being a millionaire overnight, it's not realistic. It's like things that people have done for years and years and years, good behaviors around money and investing, and making wise choices that kind of get you to being that millionaire in 10 years time. And being a millionaire is just an example, but my point is that try to think legacy. And I think it's really difficult when you're young, because you think you've got forever, and then all of a sudden you're 40 and you're like, how did I get to this age? Oh my god. So I encourage you to think legacy, but I also encourage you to live in the moment. this is like obviously counter opposite to legacy, living in the moment. But I think we spend, particularly if you grow up in a kind of prophetic circle, in the Christian world, that you can live in the future all the time, and you know when things are going to be, you know, when your prophecy is going to be realized. And actually, I think one of the things that the pandemic's taught me is to live in the moment and to be grateful for the things that I've got now and the things that are going well now. And you know, I might not have arrived to the place that I want to be. I as a person in my business, you know, just in life in general, I definitely don't feel like I've got there. But each day I try to wake up and just, you know, thank God for at least 3 things that are good and that I enjoy, and that helps me to be present, and it helps me to appreciate what I do have instead of thinking about all the gaps and the things that I don't have. So so they would be my kind of 2 bits of advice. And also, comparison kills. Like, don't pick up in the morning and scroll down Instagram and think, oh, you know, my bum's too big, or oh, I don't have those lips that she's got, or my hair's too curly, or you know, whatever the comparison is. I don't have that amazing boyfriend who might be awful. And so really, you know, don't compare yourself to other people. You are uniquely made and you have your own gifts and talents. So nurture those and stay in your lane, and don't worry about what other people are doing. And I think that's really hard when you're young. I remember, you know, when I was sort of 17, 18, really wanting to fit in and to, you know, be doing what everybody else was doing. And if I'd have just had someone to say to me, focus on you, what are you good at? Maybe I would have been different. But you know, I think sometimes some people like to take, you know, it's like the Israelites, isn't it? That 40-year journey was something like 40 days because they were just doing their own thing. So it's like, you know, you can go the quick route and you know, go for your legacy and your purpose and your destiny, or you can go on detours and try to be like other people. It's really up to you.
That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your passion. I mean, you say you're called to business. I do see you preaching a lot too on pulpits and educating the church about things too. So I'm so excited for your journey, Marteka, and I'm so thankful for you. So have an amazing day.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.